Ooh.
Donovan Mitchell. In the wake of the news that Darius Garland and Evan Mobley will be out until the end of the calendar year for the Cavs, rumors have started swirling about Donovan Mitchell's availability. They're 14-12 right now. They're 8th in the Eastern Conference, negative point differential. Been disappointing all season, even before these injuries, and it's clear that the Garland-Mitchell thing isn't working. Brian Windhorst, in a recent radio interview, said that rival front offices are wondering if Mitchell is going to become available soon, like before the deadline soon. And when you talk to people around that situation, David, it really doesn't sound good. And everybody kind of knows that Donovan Mitchell isn't going to re-sign that extension in Cleveland. So, of course, we have to wonder about the Heat here. We got to talk about Miami and if they'd be interested in circling back to Donovan Mitchell. But, David, I got to be honest, too, like the Donovan Mitchell that we talked about maybe trading for that last year in Utah is kind of a different, like Donovan Mitchell's a little bit different now. Like these last 2 years have not helped his Q rating. In other words, like his reputation around the league has gone down. He's looked at a little bit as like a stat patter, score first kind of guy. Does he make winning plays and things like that? And man, he's so good at scoring. And it just feels like any night he can hang 30 on you and it wouldn't even be a big deal because you're just accustomed to seeing it so much. And you could certainly use that if you're the Miami Heat, right? But at the same time, you wonder about the things that the Heat have been asking Tyler Hero to do and all these other things, like the winning plays, the stuff on the margins. And I just haven't seen a whole lot of that from Donovan Mitchell in these this year and a half in Cleveland. So I put the question to you, like, obviously we were talking about Donovan Mitchell as a trade candidate when he was leaving Utah. Do you think he would be a good trade candidate now after what you've seen so far in Cleveland from him?
I mean, if you've listened to the show for any long amount of time, you know that I'm not usually a fan of the trading and blowing up and those kind of rumors and things of that sort, because I think the Heat have shown over the last few seasons of Jimmy Butler's stint here that they have enough. But when it comes to Donovan Mitchell, perhaps my gauge is a little bit off. I think he's exactly what Miami needs. I think that scoring that Miami lacks so often during the regular season and at times during the postseason when it matters most could be definitely filled by a guy like Mitchell, who can get insanely hot from game to game and has put up 50 points in a number of occasions and has just a natural feel as a scorer, something that no player in Miami's roster has, even Tyler Hero. Like Tyler, as good a scorer as he is, and he is absolutely a great scorer, still struggles. And I think he just lacks the kind of physicality that Mitchell does. Mitchell is undersized as a guard, and that doesn't really matter because he's so explosive. He gets to the basket, he pulls up and gets his shots. And yes, he can be wildly inefficient, and I'm well aware of that. But I think he's also a great player who would benefit from Miami's structure in a way that he hasn't had that luxury throughout his career. In Cleveland, playing for JB Bickerstaff, as good a player coach as he is, he might not be the best X's and O's guys. And Cleveland is not necessarily renowned for their structure and consistency, not to the same degree Miami has. And everything that happened in Utah when he couldn't play alongside Rudy Gobert, and that was a team that was that got too good too fast because of Mitchell and Gobert. They weren't ready for that spotlight just yet. And I think they kind of wilted under those lights. That's not the case in Miami. You come here in Miami, you know what your role is going to be. They'll teach it to you, they'll explain it to you, and they'll help you become an even better version of who you are as a player. And I think his friendship with Bam Adebayo and his desire to win at the stages of his career and to continue building his legacy would trump everything else that we've seen from him thus far. And I think he would be a great addition to Miami's roster.
I'm surprised to hear you say that, honestly.
Yeah, I know.
I am a Donovan Mitchell fan, and I still am. And I think that the Cleveland situation is not good. And when you're looking for blame pie to hand out for what's going on in Cleveland, Donovan Mitchell isn't the only one. I think JB Bickerstaff is culpable. And by the way, I think the front office is culpable. Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland don't work together on the court, but that should not be surprising. They're two small guards, and defensively they're just too leaky. And it doesn't really work. Donovan Mitchell needs the ball in his hands. Darius Garland needs the ball in his hands. And so if it doesn't work there, it shouldn't be all that surprising. If you were to swap, I think, Donovan Mitchell and Tyler Hero, let's just say, and we'll get to what the trade would actually look like a little bit later, but just for the sake of this argument, if you were to just swap them one for one, I think Cleveland would actually be better with Tyler Hero than they would be with Donovan Mitchell. And I think that the Heat would be better with Donovan Mitchell than they are with Tyler Hero for a lot of the reasons that you laid out.
So you think it would be a win-win for both teams? Because I kind of see like Tyler and his role in Miami as the go-to bucket getter, kind of a Donovan light and what his role would be. And while he's flourished a little bit off ball, he does need the ball on his hands so much to create plays for himself and others that I don't know that it would be a perfect fit in Cleveland either.
I don't know it would be perfect, but I think it would be better for Cleveland. I'm not saying he's the guy that unlocks everything for them and makes them a title contender, but I think he'd be a better fit than Donovan Mitchell is there, because as much as he needs the ball in his hands, he doesn't need the ball in his hands as much as Donovan Mitchell does. Like that's a different level of needing the ball in your hands. Like Tyler Hero does do stuff off the ball, off the second side, attacking, scrambling deep. Like Donovan Mitchell's just like, he's one of the best isolation scorers in the league, so he doesn't need to do all that other stuff. He's like, just give me the ball, I'll just go score. And the part that I do agree with you with there is, I think Tyler Hero does have the feel of a top scorer, but he does lack the athleticism that you're talking about. And at the end of the day, Donovan Mitchell could just jump through the roof and dunk the ball. If this breaks down and that breaks down, he's like, you know what? I'll just dunk this thing. And then you can't do anything about it. And I do think that the structure of Miami would really help him. It would get, like, we know he could be a good defender. We've seen it. We've seen that he could do stuff in the playoffs and his body holds up. And I think all that stuff matters for Miami. And then for Cleveland, you get a team defender like Tyler Hero. He's been a better defender than Donovan Mitchell has for the last 2 years. A guy who could shoot off the ball. And I think Darius Garland can actually work with him offensively. Like, okay, let me just set you up here. Let me feed you. I think that's what Darius Garland wants to do, but he wants to feed. He wants to spoon feed. And with Mitchell on the court, he doesn't have to. So Darius Garland ended up just sort of standing in the corner and not really doing anything. You're like, okay, what do you do now? And so I just, I actually floated that to Locked On Cavs host Chris Manning. I was like, I was texting with him. I was like, hey, like, what do you think? And he's like, he didn't come out right out and say like, yeah, let's do a Tyler Hero, Donovan Mitchell 1-for-1 swap. But he didn't like for somebody who watches the Cavs very closely. He's like, he didn't even disagree with me. He was like, yeah, I can actually maybe even see that being the case. But let's talk about the cons of a Donovan Mitchell trade and then what a trade would look like between Miami and for Cleveland. What would it cost Miami to actually land Donovan Mitchell? Can they beat some of these rival offers that are sure to be out there? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The weather's getting colder, but the NFL offers are staying hot over at FanDuel. And right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and so much more. Go visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off the NFL and the NBA season. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL and NBA.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. And also shout out to our podcast listeners, audio platforms. Make sure you're following us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Donovan Mitchell. So you and I actually are on the same page. Again, I'm surprised by this on Donovan Mitchell. But what would be the cons if we had one here?
If there's one I see, I mean, we talked about his game, the inefficiency, that's a problem. But I think that's more than made up for everything else. So the bigger picture here is what's been the potential X factor for him in Cleveland, which is the kind of impending feeling that he's not going to be signing there and he's going to be looking to move to a bigger market. People are already saying Brooklyn is a possibility for him to return home to the New York area. The Knicks have always been a linked team for Donovan Mitchell, et cetera. So I think there are concerns there about whether or not he might sign elsewhere. But I'll be honest with you, even as I'm looking at it as a con, I think it's also an X factor that would sway in Miami's favor, because I think in Miami, Donovan Mitchell has the opportunity to become a true superstar, even more so than he already is. Like being part of a big three alongside Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, with the chances of reaching the postseason every year and going on a deep playoff run, would make Mitchell a superstar on a grand national scale. And if that's what he's looking for to get in New York, he'll find it in Miami, and with a couple of tax breaks for somebody of his salary too. So I think it would be a great opportunity for him. I find myself hard pressed to think of what a con might be in acquiring Donovan Mitchell.
It's the extension. No, he's an upgrade. I mean, he is exactly what Miami needs in terms of like a head of the snake, and he's young. And that was the thing. The difference between Damian Lillard and Bradley Beal is Donovan Mitchell is young and durable and available. And the extension is the issue. If you're Miami, it's like, okay, we're going to have to sign this guy to a $40+ million a year contract. That's what he's going to get with this under the new CBA and what the salary cap is going to be. Do we want to pay that guy that? I would argue, yeah, go for it. How old is he? 27 at this point? He is.
Bam.
I mean, and so he's got the relationship with Bam. He's 27. He's got the relationship with Bam. He's got a relationship with Dwayne Wade. If he needs to be sold on Miami, those guys are doing it. Hey, Eric Spoelstra is going to get the most out of you. You want to be coached hard. You want to be put in the right positions. Not something you necessarily got with JB Bickerstaff in Cleveland. Eric Spoelstra is going to coach you up, and he's going to make you a better player. And look what happened to Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler was a very good player. He became a superstar in Miami. He was not a superstar before Miami. He became a superstar in Miami. Bam Adebayo blossomed into one of the best 20 players in the NBA. Obviously, he's only ever played for Miami, but he's done it here. And those guys can sell Donovan Mitchell on that vision. You want to be a superstar of superstars? You want to be up there the way that people are talking about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Tyrese Halliburton and De'Aaron Fox right now? Because you're not being talked about in that way, right? No. You're like kind of in that Trae Young kind of tier right now. People are like, we know you got the talent, but like, when's it going to happen for you, right?
Empty calories, right?
And that was sort of the thing with Jimmy Butler, wasn't it? We know he's got the talent. We know he's an awesome player. We know he's an MFer.
Cancer.
But yeah, it was like, when's it going to happen on the court? When are we going to get the results? And he comes to Miami, he goes to the finals in his first year here. So I think that Donovan Mitchell could be sold on it in the extension. He'll want to, and Utah, no disrespect, Cleveland, no disrespect, but he would love to be in Miami. We know that. And so he spends his summers in Miami. Like, there's a reason. Yeah. If there is a con, it's he's just going to be really expensive. And what does that mean for our books? Because we're going to be paying Bam, we're going to be paying Jimmy. But if you can get a guy like Donovan Mitchell, you're going to have to pay somebody at some point, if that's what you've been doing. Right. And Miami has been preparing to pay somebody at some point, whether it was Kevin Durant or Damian Lillard or whoever. So I think they would see Donovan Mitchell as somebody that would
worth going into the second apron for, right? Like, that's the whole point, right? Is he going to be the one that makes?
They might not have to. I don't think that they would have to, because if you let Kyle Lowry walk after the year and you're trading the Tyler Hero salary, then you pretty much, you don't have a lot of wiggle room, but you got enough to stay under the second luxury apron. But I think that might be the benefit of doing that deal now before you sign the extension. By the way, he's got another year, right? So you're not really worried about that. He's still under contract for next year, right? So the extension wouldn't kick in until the year after next year. So you've got like a year and a half, basically, if you were to trade for him before the deadline, to be like, is this worth going into the second apron? Or do we have to make other moves to avoid the second apron? Do we have to trade Donovan Mitchell again, a year from now? Like, you know what I mean? Or just not re-sign him or whatever. I don't know. So you'd actually have the benefit of some time here. In terms of what a trade would look like. And again, I would be still surprised a little bit if Cleveland did move him before the deadline, because he's under contract. They could shop him over the summer just as easily as probably easier, if anything, then they could shop him before the deadline. But if it's so untenable and the Cavs are just ready to abort the entire Donovan Mitchell experiment, then maybe there is something that happens before the deadline. And I mentioned the Brian Windhorst thing. There have been some rumblings, right, where there's smoke, there's fire, and you talk to people around the league, and they're like, they wouldn't rule it out, but I do think it would be a surprising result if they were to move him before the deadline. That's
they would have to go like on a long losing streak, right? With all these injuries mounting, they'd have to lose like 10, 12 in a row.
It would literally just have to be so bad behind the scenes that, like, we just got to get out of this. We got to get a hard reset.
We're not going to accomplish anything, because I think you can always wait if you're Cleveland and say, you know what, regardless of how difficult it might be during the regular season and the grind and everything else and the injuries, if you can weather that storm and then make a deep playoff run, then you can convince yourself that this is worth it, despite whatever friction there may or may not be. But if it gets so bad where that's not even a possibility during the regular season because of these injuries and you go on a long losing streak, you just say blow it up and get where you can while you still can.
Before I get to like the Miami offer, other teams that would probably be in the mix: New York, Toronto. I always just throw the Lakers in there because they'd probably be interested in whatever becomes available, just sort of like the Miami Heat. I think Chicago would be interested. I think that there's a lot of teams that would be calling up the Cavaliers asking for Donovan Mitchell. I don't think the Knicks happen. I think they're very happy with Jalen Brunson, who just hung 50 points the other night. That is sort of like a Garland Mitchell thing, like two small guards. I don't know that works. I think the Knicks actually have their eyes on the Joel Embiids or something like that coming available later on. They have the draft picks and stuff like that. And then even from the Cavs perspective, like, they're not going to want to take on the Julius Randle contract. I don't know that like the Evan Fournier thing and other like cap fodder really does the trick for them, and with just draft picks included. So I don't know that the Knicks are as realistic, maybe as Knicks fans do. Toronto is interesting because they have picks. They have some expiring contracts. They have some interesting young players. Okay. The Lakers, what can they really offer? Not a whole lot, unless they put like Austin Reeves on the table, and the Cavs are like really excited about that. So I think the Heat actually would be very much in play here. If they put Tyler Hero on the table, which ostensibly I think they would have to, they would. And then the Cavs, and I'm going to refer to my message. I don't think Chris would mind me sharing this. Like, I was like, hey, what would the offer be? And he said, and this is Chris Manning, host of Locked On Cavs. It's like the Cavs would ask for Jaime. And I said, of course they would. Obviously they would. And the Heat would say no, right? The Heat would probably say no. And they would counter with, well, we'll give you Nikola Jovic, Tyler Hero, Caleb Martin, and 2 first-round picks. And Chris said that's like a good offer. That would be among the offers that they would have to consider, considering that they're going to be getting offers from other places too. You went ooh. Why'd you go ooh?
The Caleb Martin loss, I think that would be a big one. But I think his role would be, given Hyman's emergence, the fact that Haywood can provide some great defense, Duncan thriving this year, I think you can kind of handle that much more easily, especially with Donovan providing so much offensively. And that if you need a defensive spark out there, you can just throw Haywood, assuming he's healthy, and have him go to work.
Yeah.
So I guess it would be manageable. And I think you have to consider Caleb Martin an impending free agency that Miami unlikely to sign. You know, they just don't have the money available for that possibility. And he's probably going to command a lot out in the open market. And he should take that money. I mean, 100%. You can talk all you want to about, team loyalty and everything else. No, that's ridiculous. These guys are in the NBA to make money. This is their job. You go out and find that offer if you can get it.
That's the reason you include Caleb Martin in that deal, is if you don't think that you're going to be able to re-sign him, and if you're Cleveland, okay, he gives us the defensive presence on the wing that we've been looking for. He's an upgrade over even Strus and Niang and all these things that have been good for them, but like you get another guy, you get another option there. The Okoro thing hasn't super worked out. He can kind of replace him maybe in the rotation. It makes sense for Cleveland. It makes them, I think, better. Like maybe not better. Better might be strong, but it makes them whole in a way that, and it makes their roster make a little bit more sense. And you get the draft picks too in 2028 and 2030. And Miami could unlock a third first-round pick with the OKC protections and all those things. I don't know that they would have to go that far, but it would also depend on some of the other offers that are out there.
Lower ceiling, higher floor for Cleveland, right? Lower ceiling, higher floor. I think that
probably
would be
yeah. And if you really think that Evan Mobley is the guy, this sort of forces him to be that guy, because it's like, well, Donovan Mitchell's not here to score 30 points a game, so now you got to do it. So it actually might raise their ceiling. Like there's a way, if you're a front office, you could talk your way into that. And they kind of need that. No matter what, Donovan Mitchell or no Donovan Mitchell, they need Mobley to step up. And he really hasn't. I know he's hurt right now, but even when he was healthy, he wasn't really stepping up in the way that they wanted him to. So that's what a trade would look like. Would you guys do it? People listening, leave us your comments on YouTube. Make sure you follow us on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube and follow us on your favorite podcast app.